Hello and welcome to episode number 268. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Good to have you back. Today's topic is not an easy one. Kevin Riley and I are going to talk about failure. Failure on the PMP exam, to be precise. Of course, just talking about failure is not interesting. So our approach is that we want to talk about the reasons why someone may have failed the PMP exam once, twice, or maybe even 3 times. And then, more importantly, what actions can be taken to recover, regroup, and begin moving forward to passing instead of failing the exam. And of course, this is the moment when I self-servingly have to say that if you are a project manager who wants to become PMP certified, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcast, the PM Prepcast, and study for the exam by watching the in-depth exam prep training from pmprepcast.com. Of course, we cannot guarantee that you won't fail, but we know that our training is effective and that it gets you there. And now, let us guide you towards success. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview.
Today with Kevin Riley, PMP, Senior Project Management Training Consultant for KRPM Training Solutions.
Hello, Kevin, and welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Cornelius. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well today. Thank you. The sun is shining in California.
Yes, it is.
As it should be.
Yes.
So the topic that we have today is not the easiest one. We want to delve into failing the PMP exam, or rather what to do when you fail the PMP exam multiple times and how to recover from such failures. My first question to you, we're both PMP trainers. This is what we do pretty much full time. In your view, has the PMP exam become more difficult with the release of the latest PMBOK Guide edition?
Well, actually, I'd have to say yes for a couple of reasons. You have to remember that PMI's project management body of knowledge is the current set of project management principles and best practices that PMI suggests that project managers use, quote, on most projects most of the time, end quote, in order to ensure their project's successful completion. So if we look back, we're currently on the PMBOK 5th edition. If we look back to the original edition of the PMBOK Guide, the first edition, which I believe was created in 1984, if I'm not mistaken, and it was less than 100 pages, I believe. So each edition since then contains a lot more information. So really, by default, the actual body of knowledge for project management is becoming greater, and therefore the exam will also become more difficult with each new edition. Plus the fact that the PMBOK Guide 5th edition represented a major change in the body of knowledge with the addition of 2 more processes for a total of 47 and a new knowledge area for a total of 10 knowledge areas. So I think just by nature of the voluminous amount of information that's in the PMBOK, that it's actually made it a bit more difficult for students to get their heads around.
Okay, let me probe a little bit more here on this. Is it really more difficult, or is there simply more you have to know?
So that's a good question. It's probably more that you have to know for the actual exam. So I believe, I know that I don't know the specific percentages, but it is a standardized exam. So there are easy questions, there are medium difficulty questions, and there are difficult questions like all standardized exams. So I don't know if the exam questions themselves have actually become more difficult, but I think that there's more information to learn. So the study habits of the student have to be more diligent because there's a lot more information to pack into that 4-hour exam.
Okay, I can subscribe to that.
Okay.
All right, I agree with that fully. Do we know how many people actually fail the exam?
Nope, only PMI knows that. And as you know very well, Cornelius, they keep that a closely guarded secret, just like everything else in terms of passing percentage, etc. So the only way that instructors like you and I to know how many of our students pass and fail, especially 3 times, is honestly if they tell us. As human beings, unfortunately, it's not easy for us to admit failure to others or ourselves, so we don't always get that information as instructors. So I think an important aspect of learning from failure is to review what you did in the past and determine where your plan failed so you can try something else to help you succeed. Remember the old adage someone once said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing that caused you to fail over and over and expecting to achieve a different result. And I have to agree that just doesn't happen. But in terms of how many people actually fail the exam, we don't actually know. We just have to look at the students that we have and, talk to them and determine percentages and how we can help them to pass.
And how is it for you? Do you see more of your people coming back to you telling you that they're failing? Is it the same number as before?
I think generally it's not really higher, except for the fact that the PMBOK 5th edition, when the exam changed on July 31st, 2013, I saw a lot of my students trying to cram in the information before the exam changed. Because, of course, you and I know, and we told our students and potential students that there's going to be more information
Right.
that they have to study. So in my particular case, for the actual students that I have, I think certain of them went into a panic mode and had a very detailed and doable project plan in terms of their study, but they doubled their efforts and tried to do, twice the work in half the time, and unfortunately it backfired. So my highest failure rates in terms of percentage of my students happened right after the exam changed. Those people trying to take the 4th edition, and then of course they had to relearn or learn the extra material in the PMBOK guide for the 5th edition, which made it even more difficult. So other than that, really, I really haven't seen the number of failures, statistically speaking, in the last few classes I've taken from the 5th edition over the 4th edition. But I just think before that actual change, because there were so many major changes on the July 31st, 2013 PMBOK 5th edition exam, that people got into panic mode and literally lost their focus.
Yeah, in our case, it's very similar. We only do online training. So we
Right.
probably have anywhere from 5 to 10 people every day who take the PMP exam who have gone through our training.
Right.
And just like you, they do not have to tell us whether they pass or whether they fail. So we don't really know
Right.
how many people fail. What I do know is that we receive emails sometimes from people who say, unfortunately, I failed, because we give them 90 extra days in our simulator. So based on that, I know that in 2013, since 2013 to today, we received an average of 2.83 emails every month
Okay.
with people telling us, I have failed, give me the extension or give me some help or do something like that. What I didn't notice, however, is recently that I received more emails from people who have failed multiple times and who were seeking assistance. I'm not saying there are more people who fail multiple times. I'm just saying more people who failed multiple times have written to me than previously, right? So no correlation, no indication. I still think the exam is as difficult as it has ever been.
Right.
And it's just people realize I need help and they reached out to me. And this is one of the reasons why we have this conversation here. So let's get into this discussion here. When people fail, who do they blame from your perspective?
Well, we're all human beings, right, Cornelius? So unfortunately, the majority of us tend to blame others for bad things that happen to us, including failing the PMP exam once, twice, or even 3 times. And, to be honest, although there are probably external factors that contribute to this failure, PMP exam takers have to be proactive and problem solvers like good project managers and take a look in the mirror and see what they can change. It includes the fact that you, the person who actually failed, had a lot to do with why you failed. And I think by analyzing your previous study patterns and behaviors and determining where you did not follow through or stick to your plan, you are performing problem solving on one of the most important projects in your career, namely becoming a PMP. So we need to look in the mirror and determine that, what we did personally in our plan or in our behaviors that cause us to fail the PMP, especially if we failed it 3 times.
At this point, I think it's important to say that our conversation is also available as an article on the internet. The article is called 6 Reasons Why You May Have Failed the PMP Exam 3 Times. 6 Reasons Why You May Have Failed the PMP Exam 3 Times. And as part of this article, you and I brainstormed and we came up with 6 possible reasons and actions that people can take in order to, pick themselves up from the dust of failing multiple times and say, okay, I still want to do this. I still want to move on. Because from my perspective, it's very important to say, okay, you have failed 3 times. Yes, you have accepted the fact you're partially responsible, but also remember, this is not the easiest exam. It has a certain threshold, and people do fail it. And just the fact that you have stuck with this, that you've tried it 3 times, it puts you above all the other people who do not even try to take the PMP exam.
That's correct.
Yeah. So the first reason that we may have found is that you simply lack understanding of the PMP exam concepts. What's your take on this one, Kevin?
In terms of lack of understanding, it's very difficult, I think, for people who have been project managers to get in what we call the PMI mindset, and it has different names. Basically, understanding the principles and best practice in the PMBOK guide are not necessarily things that we would do on our projects on a daily basis across the board. So to be quite honest with you, Cornelius, I think people that take the PMB exam that have never been on a project in their life actually have an advantage over us project managers.
Yeah, but they don't qualify to take the exam.
That's right. So the important thing is what I do in my classes is when people go through those type of things, I point out what might not actually jive with what they do in real life so that they understand the concept from the PMBOK guide so that they're able to understand, the questions correctly. And then another thing, if we go right into the action that we're talking about in this particular problem, is one of the things that I did when I studied for the PMP exam was to get a study buddy. So it's important to have someone else to work with you as a team. And we actually signed a contract that basically we kept an eye on each other during our studies. And what we did was every other Saturday we would go to each other's house and we would sit down and take one of the OSP International PM exam simulator full 200 question tests and work with each other. I would read the question. We would determine and discuss what we thought was the best answer. And then we would come up with that. And then we would check the answer to determine if our logic was correct. The most important thing in this particular case was that it was a learning experience because as you know, Cornelius, the best way to learn something is to teach it.
Yeah.
So by making a case for why you think a certain answer choice was the correct one, you're actually teaching yourself and your study buddy about the important concepts of the exam that's going to allow you to pass.
That's correct. So much for the first reason why you might have failed the PMP exam multiple times, just a lack of understanding of the PMP exam concepts. Reason number 2, you struggle with standardized exams.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny. When I took the PMP exam, a similar exam I took was when I was a sophomore in high school, and it was the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. And they don't call it battery for nothing because you get battered during this exam. So it's a very difficult exam. And to be honest with you, as you know, standardized exams are actually set up so that only a certain percentage of people are going to pass. They make them difficult for a reason because the PMP is a very, a globally recognized credential that is very difficult to get. And they only want the people that actually are prepared for the exam to actually pass the exam. So just like a CPA exam or an LSAT, the law SATs, they're very standardized exams and they make them very difficult across the board. So that's what makes it difficult. In this case, a lot of people are not used to taking these type of standardized exams, especially as adults. We might have taken the SATs, when we were in high school to get into college, but these type of standardized exams we're just not used to taking, and it takes a lot of practice to learn how to take them effectively.
Yeah, and that's really where the crux also lies with this one. It's very difficult to give people an action that they can take in order to, counteract their struggle in this.
Right.
The only real suggestion that I have for this is, practice.
Yes.
Do take as many 4-hour full practice exams as you can before you walk into the actual exam room.
Right.
Don't just think, oh, I'm going to take 50 here, 20 there, 30 here. No, no, no. You want to actually sit down for 4 hours. You want to put yourself under the stress of a real PMP exam.
Yes.
4 hours, 200 questions, again and again and again and again and again. You would never take that behind the wheel driving test without having driven for hours and hours and hours.
That's right.
Before that and practice what you need to do. In fact, when I took the behind the wheel driving test, I went into the neighborhood of where the DMV was.
Excellent.
I practiced on the roads
Great.
that the DMV would be taking me onto. And that's the same with the PMP exam. You want to practice with an exam simulator that allows you to do this as closely as possible. That's pretty much the only idea and suggestion that I have in order to counteract that.
And in addition to that, you want to do exactly what you did in terms of your driving test. You want to lock the door. You want to put a sign on the door that says to your wife, to your children, to the dog, please don't bug me for the next 4 hours, because this will enable you to be in that environment that you'll be in the Prometric Test Center and actually maintain your focus. If you've done that 4 or 5 times, then you'll be used to that when you actually walk into the exam room the day of your exam.
Moving on to the next possible reason, you may simply have lost confidence. After all, when you fail the exam for the first time, okay, that's a beating. You take it a second time, but then, you're starting to lose confidence in your own abilities, right?
Right, exactly. And that's really where a coach comes in. So just like pro athletes, they may be doing very well or doing well enough, to get by, but to get to that next level, to pass the next level of performance, they need a coach. They need someone to work with them specifically to do a couple things, to look at where they are failing in terms of their plan or their behaviors, and then work with them to make a plan that's going to work forward to be able to allow them to actually pass the exam.
How do you do your coaching sessions with your students when you do these kind of things? Is this a one-on-one thing? Is this a group coaching? How do you approach this?
It's I think the most effective is a one-on-one, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the same room, although we both know that face-to-face communication is the best and most effective form because of those nonverbal cues. But even on a conference call, the first thing that I do is actually ask people to give me their plan. And a lot of times people don't have a written plan at all. So that's kind of the first step. Create a project plan for your studies.
Now, are we talking plan or schedule?
We're talking, well, okay. It's actually a combination of both, because your activities are going to be the specific activities that you're actually going to create, and that's going to be in your schedule. So the part of the plan would be, yes, I am going to study for 10 hours a week, and the schedule would be, these are the specific things that I'm going to do for that 10 hours a week.
And what do you do for your coaching students? How do you help them get across this barrier and move them forward?
I determine, I have a short questionnaire before we even start. It's kind of like a pre-assessment to see what their specific needs are. They may have trouble with, English as a language, first language. They may have trouble just focusing, which there are other things that we can do to help them. They may just not understand the actual questions or the material itself because it's so foreign to them. So really what I look for is do a questionnaire, ask some basic questions about what they've done up to this point to see if there's anything blatant that's actually missing. But after that, really kind of doing a requirements analysis and determining how I can actually help them. We come up with a plan and, like you said, more importantly, a schedule that's realistic according to those areas that they've had deficiencies in before, but also the most important thing being realistic in the number of hours they can actually study. A lot of students are very unrealistic because we as human beings tend to underestimate everything that we do.
Yeah, and as project managers, we should know what unrealistic project dates means.
Right.
You're going to fail the project, right?
Right, exactly. So
Mhm.
I think that's one of the most important aspects that comes out. People say, "Oh yeah, I thought I was able to do 20 hours a week, but I was only doing 4 hours a week." Well,
Yeah.
guess what? It's okay to do 4 hours a week, but do the 4 hours a week. So that's kind of
Yeah, and
the
adjust
plan
your
of attack.
schedule accordingly.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of course, you mentioned in the beginning you prefer or you recommend doing it one-on-one versus in a group coaching. But
Yes.
of course, there is a financial difference
Yes.
between that because, coaching isn't free
Yes.
because, you want to reimburse your coach for the hours that they invest in you.
Right. So another thing I do offer is the ability to get on a podcast, a live podcast for an hour. It's usually we usually don't go more than 2 hours. But what I'd like to do is kind of go through exam questions with those people and see what types of things they're having trouble with.
Oh, so you're actually looking at real live exam sample questions.
Yes, that's actually I have.
Okay. And then
Yes.
you explain, why is A incorrect and how do you
Yes.
address analyze this and okay, yeah.
Right.
I can see how that helps.
So I have a contract with one of my vendors, and they allow me to do that, and that's very helpful because it goes back to what I did with my study buddy, and I actually have people try to answer the questions, and you get the discussion going between them, and it really helps drive home the points. In that case, I normally don't go more than 4 people per podcast because then it gets a little bit difficult to control. But there are a couple of different things available to people in terms of PMP coaching that have failed. Really, what they should look at is if they failed it twice, like you said, before they take it the third time, that's really the best time to get a PMP exam prep coach.
Yeah. Or if you have failed it 3 times,
Right.
you have to wait for a year if you can
Yes.
do it again. But then, after a half a year, you want to start get back into the game and,
Right.
that's the moment when you want to coach after the third time as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let us move on to the fourth item that we have. You already touched upon this. English may not be your first language. And I can actually speak to this because, well, guess what? English is not my first language. You won't know really because my English has improved massively in the past 10 years since I've lived here in the US. Well, I have to say my English has gone out the door and my American has improved massively.
There you go.
And so when I took the PMP exam, it was one of my big concerns because I had to practically learn a new language.
Right.
I knew English, I knew business English, I knew conversational English, but I didn't know project management English.
Right.
And I had never heard of earned value before or work breakdown structure. Even the term baseline was new to me
Right.
in terms of the word itself. And so I had to learn a new language. And it's really complicated. The only thing that allowed me to do this was I had a study buddy, I had online study buddies, and I just kept going at it again and again and again. And I can tell you, it took me 3 hours and 58 minutes to finish my PMP exam because of this. It's just the language can be a barrier here.
Right. And a lot of people that are taking the PMP exam don't realize that the PMI offers language aids when you're actually taking the PMP exam. So what that means is you can toggle back and forth between your language and the actual exam itself, by the way, which is only given in English globally.
Yeah, only the English counts.
Only the English
right?
counts, right?
Right. If you're like me, bilingual German English, and you read the German question,
Right.
and it's translated incorrectly, which I don't hope, and you answer it wrong because of that, then yeah. But the English question and the English answers count, but you can still read the German or the French or the Italian or the Arabic.
Yeah. So it's a total of 13 languages. So, and I have actually had students that did not know that. And once I told them about that, they were able to take the exam and pass using that.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Now the only caveat there is you still only have 4 hours to take the exam. So if you're toggling back between the English, you don't want to do it for every question would be my recommendation. Only those questions that you actually have no clue what the English is about, read it in your native tongue, and then go back to that specific question. I believe that will help tremendously. That's what this particular individual did. And I coached her before that to do that. I told her specifically, do not toggle between every question. Go through the things that we talked about in class and use your best judgment. But if you get stuck, use that language aid. But what I told her to do is, if there are any questions that you get stuck on because of language, mark them for review and do them on your last pass. Because this way you're going to take care of the ones that you do know, you do understand, and then first, and then you can spend more time after you answered those other questions, going back and forth between the language age, which will hopefully, help you to pass, which it did for this particular individual.
Okay, so in review, so far we have looked at a few reasons why you may have failed the PMP exam. You lack understanding of exam concepts. You struggle with standardized exams. You've lost confidence, and now also English may not have been or may not be your first language. But it could also be something as simple as you cannot handle the exam room distractions.
Yes, and that is something that goes back to what we originally talked about in terms of focus. Because of the fact that the reason that PMI uses prometric test centers is because they're very, I'm going to call it a sterile environment. So there is a proctor there. There are certain rules and regulations that are supposed to be followed across the board by each of these places that actually has a prometric test center, which is normally some type of learning institution like a Sylvan Learning Lab or a college that has a specific place to actually do these exams. And the thing about it that you have to realize as a PMP exam prep taker is it's not only PMP exams that are actually being given when you go for yours. It could be the CPA, the LSAT, it could be any number of exams in there. And so in terms of distractions, one of the most important things to do is determine what distracts you before you actually go into the Prometric Test Center. And the way to do that is, like we talked about before, put yourself in a room as close as possible to that environment by locking the door, letting people know that you're going to be busy, and try to focus. What some people do is they put earplugs in. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't do that because I have ringing in my ears, so that actually distracts me more than it helps. But the Prometric test centers do give you a choice of earplugs or earphones that you can put over to eliminate distractions. So from my perspective, try to get into the environment as much as possible before in your own environment at home or wherever you study. And then in the other important thing is PMI understands that sometimes distractions do occur in these Prometric test centers, and you have the right to actually get up, tell the proctor that you've been distracted, and tell the reasons to PMI and reschedule the exam. I have a very extreme example of that. One of my students was taking her exam, and the cleaning lady came in and started Windexing her screen while she was taking the PMP exam. Of course, she didn't know that she was able to reschedule, so it was within the first hour of her 4 hours. She was completely flustered and failed. So people need to realize, first of all, get into that focused environment as close as possible on your own before you walk in, but also understand that you have the right to be free of distractions within that room. So if someone's sneezing next to you or the cleaning lady comes in, my suggestion is talk to the proctor, tell them you want to reschedule exam, you call up PMI, and I'm sure you'll be able to do that.
Right. I'd like to up the ante here in terms of practicing, distractions. If you are subscribed to a simulator, grab your laptop, go to a local coffee shop. If you need internet access, that's usually a place where you find it. Sit in the middle of the coffee shop and take a complete 4-hour exam right there with the people around you coming in, ordering, walking, music blaring in the background. Learn to focus on what's important.
Yes.
The 200 questions in front of you. Ignore the rest.
Right. No, that's a good example. Yeah, it's good.
And that really takes us to the last item. And we've talked about this a couple of times already. And the last item simply is you didn't take any practice exams.
Right. Yeah. And the important thing about taking those is you get used to the actual format of the questions. And there are a lot of different types of questions, and being a standardized exam, they're going to have questions that are 5 sentences long, where the last sentence is really the question. So they want to make sure that you actually read the question and the full answer, and that will enable you to do that. The more practice exams you actually perform and take before the actual exam, the better off you are to handle the day of the exam. And the two things that I use in my classes, also that's very important, that comes with taking these exams, is the first one is RTFQ, which is read the full question, because quite often the question is buried in superfluous information, and quite often the answers are also. So it's RTFQ, which is read the full question, and RTFA, read the full answers. If you don't understand a question, or you think a question is too easy, it probably is. So you might want to reread that question again and actually determine what the actual question is looking for in terms of the best answer. So by taking as many of those practice exams, you're going to see the majority of the different types of questions that you see on the actual PMP exam itself.
Right. Here are my final thoughts in regards to failing the PMP exam multiple times. Everyone is different. The 6 reasons that we have just given you, that you can also find in the article, they may be part of your problem, they may not. That's perfectly all right, because everyone is different. The one thing that you have to remember is that, number one, don't get discouraged because of this. The PMP exam is not impossible to pass, and you can pass it as well. So really, do what you would do as a project manager. You see that there is a project that is failing. What do? You analyze the situation. You see what's going wrong. You make a change to that situation, and then you bring the project to a successful completion. That is what we do as project managers, and that is what you can do as a future PMP as well. You bring this to a successful close. Now, Kevin, I want to hand this over to you and allow you to give your final thoughts as well. But first of all, we talked about the fact that you do coaching.
Yes.
And I don't want to let you go without telling people where they can find you. So what is the website that they need to go to if they are looking for a PMP coach like yourself?
So yes, so my company website is www.krpm-training.com, and it's KRPM Training Solutions Incorporated, and that you can get a lot more information about exam prep and also about coaching if you need those types of activities.
Excellent. So krpm-training.com. Kevin, what then are your final thoughts? What's your number one recommendation, the one thing you want people to know about failing the exam and then picking yourself up, dusting yourself off and moving on?
I think the major thing is to take a snapshot of your previous plan and determine where it went wrong, what actually failed in the plan. And for a lot of people, it's in terms of your study schedule that you weren't realistic about the number of hours that you can do per week, per month, etc. So my major suggestion would be realistic about your study time, just like you would be realistic about the resources on your project and what their actual availability is.
Wonderful. Kevin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Cornelius. Always a pleasure.
And that was my discussion with Kevin Riley on the various reasons for failing the PMP exam and ways to recover, regroup, and then hopefully succeed. And let me once again remind you that you can find Kevin at krpm-training.com if you are looking for a coach. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. And yes, when you write, please do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. The most difficult way is, in the long run, the easiest. Until next time.